The head Republican and the head Democrat, besides differing politically, hated each other's guts personally. The Republican, a florid-faced blonde giant, slammed his hand on the table during our meetings. "No, we don't have the money for this. The feds and the state screwed this up. Let them fix it." The Democrat, a small man with a dark complexion and thick black hair, came right back. "Can it, Jim? It doesn't matter at this point who's responsible. The media is all over this thing. These people we're going to see Thursday are all locals. Besides doing the right thing, if you tell them no, it'll amount to political suicide. So we may have to give up a project or two. This is more important. Tell you what, we'll take a vote right now, and I tell you now, I'll make it my mission for the public to know how we voted and who voted no. Want to take that chance with your political career?" They squabbled for a bit, but in the end it was never in question. The vote was unanimous. The one thing the Democrat insisted on was that the junior Democratic commissioner, who was facing an election battle, be allowed to present the money. The night of the meeting, the room was again packed, except this time there were 3 TV crews, 6 newspapers, and 4 radio stations being represented. The crowd knew well of the relationship of some of the commissioners, and many hoped there would be fireworks. It was exactly the opposite. There was a sense of calm. They saved us until last. My counterpart couldn't be there, so I did the speech. It was agreed that when it became time to award the money, the Republican would introduce the junior Democratic commissioner in a show of harmony. That wasn't what happened. The senior Republican stood. "This is a very good cause, a viable program that does a great service to the community. We're aware of our sister county going above and beyond. We feel that we, too, should give more help than asked for." My esteemed colleague was going to announce the grant, but just a bit ago we had a bit of a conference. "We were going to give your organization $7,500, but the esteemed senior Democrat did a small poll, and we decided to give you $10,000 instead, mostly due to the kindness of our Democratic members. I'm sure they'll be glad to field any questions. As Republicans and human beings, we are happy to follow their lead." He slammed his gavel down. Meeting adjourned. He smiled as he left, watching his competition give statements to the press. One afternoon, I came home from work to find 4 guys waiting for me in my living room. Eve kissed me and introduced them as new volunteers. "Listen to them, honey. They could be a lot of help." They were all political science majors working on a master's degree. The leader, Thad Emerson, gave me their pitch. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're going to use this as part of our schoolwork. It's going to be in our thesis work, kind of a David versus Goliath battle, a grassroots organization against the political establishment in the technological age. We've already got some stuff worked up we believe can help you, if you'll have us. Where's your headquarters?" Eve, who had been listening quietly, laughed and pointed at our kitchen table. "There you go." Thad was shocked. "You don't have an office? How do you get anything done? Never mind. Do you have a list of your members and what they do?" He turned and pointed at one of his friends. "Billy, get on that. We're going to need an office and a conference room. Phones, computers, copiers, anything else you think we might need." He pointed at the other 2. "Jerry, you research grant history and see if anything else is out there. Eve told me they have a few locals on it. Touch base and see what they've got. Zane, go through their history and see which state and federal politicians are for, against, or undecided. Find anything you can, and particularly, who's up for re-election." "What are you going to do?" I asked. He grinned. "Stick like glue to you. If your group approves, I'm your new campaign manager. It's not a traditional campaign. You're not running for office. But you are trying to sway public opinion, and I'm a damn good speechwriter. Are we in?" I shook all their hands, and my core group was formed. They were all on individual studies, so their time was their own. It was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I got 4 lifelong friends out of it. In 48 hours, we had a committee headquarters, the offices of a defunct textile mill. The owner gave us the space free, but we had to pay for the power. I was a little concerned about that, but Thad convinced me it was necessary. Soon we looked like a regular office, people working phones and computers. It was bevy of activity from early in the morning until late at night. Thad asked me if we were coordinating with the other committees. "What other committees?" He was shocked. Surely others have organized. After all, this is a statewide problem. We need to coordinate our efforts, present a united front. The more people, the more potential voters. The more voters, the more leverage we have with politicians. Those state boys aren't going to be as easy or as eager as the locals. Never mind, we'll look into it. In a week, his techno-wizard had the names and addresses of the people affected by the loss of the grant. We had a 4th-class mailing permit now, and mass mailings to all registered voters were going out regularly, in addition to internet contact. Mostly updates and pleas urging them to contact their representatives at both state and federal levels and voice their approval for the program to continue. We never asked for money. There was a bit of an argument over it. We could use every dime we got, but it made me feel too much like a real politician. Thad got around that by posting our finances on the blog they had created, updated weekly. Everyone interested could see at a glance where we were. Soon unsolicited donations were coming in, some of them quite large. Several of our members were lawyers, and they drew up papers listing us as a non-profit watchdog group, with a 4-person committee formed to track the money. Soon we were getting requests from across the state to help them form groups, and Thad and I were crisscrossing the state, giving advice. People started showing up at our public meetings and conferences to watch us operate. 90% of the state counties were operating their own groups, but we operated as a state alliance. We split the state into 4 sections, and they each elected a representative to meet and coordinate state activities. I was voted president. Only one person objected, my counterpart from our group. He got 3% of the vote. It caused a rift that kept getting wider. We placated him somewhat by giving him the seat for our part of the state, with me remaining in charge. It worked out well because that way the committee could never be deadlocked. If the vote was tied, I cast the deciding vote. Otherwise, I didn't have to vote. Things got a little tense on the home front when we discovered Stanley was one of the biggest opponents to renewing the grant. He tried to talk me into toning down a little when we posted a list of all the state and federal politicians who were for and against renewing. I was even asked about it in one of my interviews. How do you feel about your father-in-law opposing this? I had worked with Thad, knowing the question was coming. I have great respect for my father-in-law. The beauty of our form of government is we can agree or disagree without rancor. He's done many good things for the state in his tenure. It's just in this case, I think he doesn't have all the information he needs to understand the situation fully. But either way, he can't help but follow his belief in what is right for the state. And I respect him for it. Great job of walking a tightrope, huh? In the end, we lost the grant, but got 2 new federal and 1 state grant that more than doubled the funds the programs had gotten previously. Stanley was a gracious loser in public, actually supporting the approval of the state grant. His quote about my role? I'm happy and glad he's not the least bit interested in politics. He's too good at it. He did a great thing, a service to the state, and we're all appreciative of his efforts. Privately, he held a grudge. This episode led to me serving on various committees on state and local levels. Both parties approached me, urging me to run for county commissioner, training ground for bigger things. Both were surprised to find out I was a registered independent. But if it was a cause I believed in, I would help, but never more than one at a time. I almost burnt out crisscrossing the state on the first one, and deeply resented the time it took away from Eve. Vivian and I had become fairly close. She found out early she couldn't have children and adopted us, me in particular. She was the one who started recommending me for committees. You'll do a good job, and you'll follow your conscience, something rare these days. It's why you'll never be a good politician, and I love you for it. Stanley, of course, resented it and tried to get me to influence her. It pissed him off when I laughed and refused. The Capitol had a big Christmas parade every year, and this year she was the Grand Marshal. Eve and I brought Amy, now 9, to watch it. We were her house guests, and Amy, being Amy, soon had her charmed. It was no surprise to me when Amy wound up in the convertible with her, waving to the crowd as they sat up high. Fred, Celeste, and the rest of my family teased her unmercifully later, but they were proud. The announcers tentatively identified her as a granddaughter. Nobody bothered to correct them. There was a picture on the front page of our local paper, identifying her as a local. Her classmates were awed, even more so when Vivian made an appearance at her school for career day, at her invitation. It was unannounced deliberately, so it wouldn't disrupt the school. Things were heating up in the election. There was still 10 months to go, but preliminary polls showed Stanley ahead slightly, but close enough to cause concern. He had a pretty good flow of contributions and was flooding the media with print ads and commercials. My business had grown considerably. I suspected at times it was because of my political connections, but I couldn't help who I married into. If any of my customers hinted at bigger contracts in return for my supposed influence, I tried to drop them. I did an excellent job for a reasonable price, so as soon as they figured it out, they stopped. I now had 4 crews working in different locations, so I rarely laid cable anymore unless it was an emergency. I managed and supervised mostly. Eve was proud of my success and was pushing me to start a family. I surprised her one day by calling her into the bathroom. "Watch," I said, as I flushed her birth control down the toilet. She cried for 2 hours, then went on the internet, looking up popular baby names. The loving I got that night was extra good. 3 months later, Eve met me at the door, tears streaming down her face. I thought someone was hurt. I held her, trying to get her to tell me what was wrong. She finally held something she had in her hand up. Test sob positive, baby sob. I went to my knees, dragging her with me. We were gonna have a baby. Soon I was crying as hard as she was. It took us 10 minutes before we were able to get up and go inside. She had her mother go with her the next day to the doctor. When he verified it, she and Greta went straight to Celeste's shop and told her. Work came to a standstill. Soon the whole family knew, and we ended up having a cookout in the meadow to celebrate. I think Amy was happier than anyone. She was just past 10, and she told us point blank if we ever used anyone else to babysit when she got older, she would never speak to us again. Eve told her she was hired, even wrote up a little contract and signed it. She framed it and hung it on her bedroom wall. I did a commercial for Stanley. It was one of the most effective for him to date. It was me, in work clothes, running my ditch witch. I cut it off and looked into the camera. There were about a dozen of his political posters behind me. Stanley Wallace? I said, in a serious voice, yes, I'm voting for him. His programs for small business owners, like me, puts him well in front of his competition. He understands we're the backbone of this country. If we go, so goes the state. I ad-libbed the next part, thinking they would edit it out, but they liked it so much they left it in. Said it humanized him a bit more. Besides, he's my father-in-law. My wife would kill me if I didn't vote for him. He won his primary easily. His opponent did even better, garnering almost 150,000 more votes than Stanley. His team was worried. If he could generate that kind of numbers in a primary, he might actually win come November. He stepped up his advertising, until one of his commercials aired at least once an hour on all the local channels. His opponent was single, having divorced years ago and never remarrying. His team pushed this difference, portraying Stanley as a staunch family man. Greta, Eve, and I were dragged along on countless appearances to reinforce the image. It got pretty old pretty quick. I cut back, despite his displeasure. I wasn't running for office and had a business to take care of. Eve came home with me for a few days, then her dad called and she rejoined him on the campaign trail over my objections. She called every night at first, then it would be every few days. He was concentrating on the western part of the state, his weakest area. I would see them on television, and both Eve and Greta were getting thinner, paler, and their smiles were as fake as you could get. I put my foot down. It was 6 weeks before the election, and his opponent was ahead by 4 points. He was going wide open. I don't think he slept more than 3 hours a night, and expected the same from everyone around him. Eve was 6 months along, and the pace was getting to her. I went to the town he was speaking in, unannounced, and tried to take Eve home. Enough is enough, honey. You look worn down, and I'm afraid it's not good for the baby. Your dad either wins or he doesn't. At this point, I don't care. Let's go home. I'll build a fire and we'll snuggle. I'll run you a bubble bath, light some candles, rub lotion into that sexy baby bump. We'll love on each other for a while and sleep 10 hours straight. Okay. She was snuggling to me, hanging on to me like I was a life preserver on a sinking ship. I was shocked when she refused. I can't, honey. I promised Daddy I'd stay with him until the election. It's only a few more weeks, then it'll all be over. I'll be home. We'll be fine. It'll all be over. I didn't like hearing that at all, and I really didn't like the look in her eyes. They were the eyes of a trapped animal. Listen to me carefully, Eve. I don't like the way you're looking. I don't like the way you're acting. You seem to be hiding something. Look me in the eye. Tell me what's going on. She held me tighter and wouldn't look at me. Greta came in, alerted by one of the flunkies, I guess, saw us together and paled. I took that to be a bad thing. Greta, please, talk some sense into your daughter. Look at her. She doesn't look well. I'm afraid for the baby. Tell her to come on home with me. Think of your granddaughter. Yes, it was a girl. I was more than surprised when she supported Eve on staying. Please, Tommy. It's just a few more weeks. I'll make sure she gets her rest, takes her vitamins. It'll be over soon, and we can get back to our lives. I wasn't going for it. No. If he wins, in 2 years he'll be gearing up for re-election. If he loses, he'll start planning his comeback now. Either way, we lose. We're going home now. Come on, Eve. Let's get you packed. She looked at her mom in a panic. They were about to say something when Stanley came into the suite with his entourage, including his security detail. Tommy, boy, what's this I hear about taking Evie home? It just isn't possible right now. Demographics show many women identify with her, especially as she's in the family way. Be reasonable. Run along home, or better yet, stay with us. Your crews can look after themselves for a few weeks. I couldn't believe the gall of the man. Not no, Stan, did I mention he hates being called that? But hell no. There's not an office in the world that's worth the health of my wife and child. We'll be leaving shortly. End of discussion. Instead of answering, he motioned everyone out except his security people. For guys, two pretty big, all ex-military. As they were leaving, I heard Eve whisper, "Please, Daddy, don't," as they shut the door. The look on his face when he turned was not pleasant. Listen, a-hole, I'm not about to let some redneck screw up this campaign, even if my daughter was stupid enough to marry him. I need to win. I've made a lot of promises to a lot of people that I need to prove up on. Think about it. It could be a sweet life. I'll appoint you to some position or another, with a great salary and a lot of perks. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Listen to me closely, Stan. I don't give a shit whether you win this election or not. It's not worth my wife and child being endangered. I'm going home and taking her with me, and I don't want to hear you say shit about it. Don't push me on this. I'd hate to go to the press and tell them the great Stanley Wallace wants to be governor so bad he's willing to risk the health of his only child and first granddaughter. That would go over well with Marge in Norsville. Then it became surreal. Greta, Eve out. I need to explain the facts of life to this hick. They were both crying, begging him to leave it alone. But the two smallest security guys took their arms firmly and led them out. Eve had the wildeed look of a trapped animal. Please, honey, please. Remember I love you. Please. She was still begging when they shut the door. I hadn't stood idly while this was going on, going after her immediately. The two biggest goons locked down on me. I think I surprised one when I turned and headbutted him. He staggered back, and the other one simply buried his fist in my stomach. I wasn't a fighter, wasn't trained in martial arts, but I was a husband enraged. Even out of breath on the ground, I tried to fight back. The guy I headbutted kicked me in the balls hard. It knocked me out. I came to, strapped into a chair. Stanley pulled another chair in front of me, lifting my head and slapping me hard. Good, you're awake. You don't know how long I've wanted to do that. I despise you. I had big plans for Eve, getting her married to just the right man, make us all happy. Then here comes Joe Redneck and screws it all up. But you have a chance to save everything. Being a redneck brings in a certain vote. He slapped me again, grinning. Damn, I could do that all day and enjoy it. All right, now that I've got your attention, here's how it's going to be. Tomorrow, and for the rest of the campaign, you're going to be on every podium with me, smiling and waving to the crowd. Understand? If you do, then when it's over you can go back to your petty little life. Not with Eve, of course, but if you're good I'll allow visitation for your child, occasionally. He was grinning like mad, enjoying this tremendously. My rage was beyond description. Screw you, Stan. When this gets out, you're done. Kidnap? Assault? Kiss the governorship goodbye, shithead. He actually laughed. You won't tell. I have a little leverage, insurance if you will. Watch this. He held up his phone, showing a video clip, one that destroyed my world. It was Eve, in a room somewhere. You could hear Stan in the background. She was naked, her pregnant belly plain to see. Here she is, as promised, ready to serve. So, can I count on your support? The camera angled, to show a man in his late 50s, naked, erect, and grinning. If she's as good as she was last time, I'm in. Come over here, baby. Remind me why I like your dad so much. Eve was pushed to her knees, while the camera zoomed in on her face. Tears were streaming down her face, and she was mouthing, "No," over and over again. He cut off the phone. You don't need to see the rest. You know what happens. Here is how it's going to work. Nobody needs to see this. Nobody needs to know just what a whore your wife is. Think about the baby. It may actually be yours. So, if you want me to keep it buried, you be up on that podium with me tomorrow, smiling and waving. When I win, you can go back home. Eve might actually want to go back with you. I don't care. I'll be done with her, at least until the next election. Understand? Just so you know, buck me on this and I'll tip the cops off about the kiddie porn you have on your computer, put there by my people, and make sure you never get to see your child. My eyes had bulged out. My face was flushed. My heart was going a mile a minute. I never knew rage and heartbreak like I did now. Then, an icy calm came over me. I wasn't going to kill him. I was going to destroy him. He'd never hold a public office again. Maybe even end up in jail. One thing for sure, I was done with the whole family. Nothing mattered anymore except revenge. Stan's eyes narrowed. He slapped me again. You're thinking about doing something stupid. I can see it in your eyes. Think about it. I'd hate for Eve to end up in an accident, maybe die or lose the baby. God, how I wanted to kill him then. I took great pleasure in imagining beating him to death, slowly, savoring every blow. If you do end up doing something stupid, I have a lot of video you don't ever want your family to see, that will some way find its way onto the internet. I'll of course be devastated, bemoaning the fact that you led her into such an aberrant lifestyle, and promised to stand by her while she's rehabilitated. Face it, your only option is to go along. It'll be over soon, and I'll still find you some cushy job, far away from me and out of the public eye. Then he made his mistake. Oh, one more thing. He slammed a fist into my ribs. We all heard it snap. Pain like I never knew washed over me. Damn, that felt good. I was slumped down, trying to breathe. They let me hang, strapped to the chair, for what seemed like hours, but it was probably only 10 minutes. One of the security guards finally noticed my gasps for breath and the blood foaming on my lips. The rib had punctured a lung. I was literally drowning in my own blood. Still took them 20 minutes to decide to call the EMTs. They took the time to bruise me up pretty good, then dropped me at the bottom of the stairway in the hotel. I was put into intensive care after the operation, kept sedated. I finally woke up, and the doctor and nurses were very constrained around me. The doctor tried to explain my injuries. When you fell down the stairs? Bullshit, doc. If you're any kind of doctor at all, you can tell I was beaten. I expect to have you testify in the trial? The doctor wouldn't look me in the eye. As I said, your fall down the stairs did a lot of damage. We have you in a light cast, and the splint on your broken finger should let it heal just fine. Just follow the nurse's instructions, and you'll be fine in a month. We're going to keep you for a few days, just to ensure the healing process. Is there anything we can get you? Just buzz? I was starting to get really angry. I need my cell phone back. I need to make a few calls. And where are my clothes? HR reached up and adjusted my fore. Now, remember to remain calm. I was doing my best to try to scream for help when I passed out. I was kept drugged for 6 days. I remember people coming in and out, and barely being awake long enough to be fed by a nurse. On the 7th day, I opened my eyes, thinking clearly for the first time. There was a young nurse watching me. She looked familiar somehow. You don't remember me, do you? I looked at her as she fiddled with my fore. Scared to death, she was putting me back to sleep. She leaned down close to my ear and whispered, "It's pure saline. It should flush the drugs out of your system in a couple of days. I've met you before. You helped my handicapped sister keep her job. If she hadn't, my mom would have had to quit her job, and we would have lost our house. Now, is there anything I can do for you that won't be traced back to me? They have guards posted outside, and we're checked before and after we come into the room. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like it isn't strictly legal." I shook my head, trying to clear it. Suddenly I knew what to do. I repeated the same number to her over and over, until I felt she had committed it to memory. Call this woman. Don't do it from your phone, borrow one. Tell her where I am, what's happening, and tell her to come get me, as fast as she can. Tell her to bring Jerry. She'll know what I mean. Don't give her your name, and I'll keep you out of it. But hurry. Do it as soon as you can. 18 hours later, I heard a commotion outside my room. A couple of shouts, as few grunts, and the door was swept open. A man I had worked on a committee with last year walked through the door, followed by Vivian. The doctor was with me, desperately turning the valve on my foredrip. I had acted confused and unresponsive, keeping up the pretense. I looked up and grinned. "Give it up, Doc. I'm wide awake." "Hello, Vivian. You have no idea how happy I am to see you. I need a blood test, right away. I have no idea what they've been putting into my system." "Oh, and have Jerry arrest everyone you see, would you? You'll do that, won't you, Jerry?" Jerry, head of the State Bureau of Investigation, said he'd like to do that very thing, but right now he was holding everyone for questioning while he sorted it out. I found out I was in a private clinic, mostly for people who wanted to lose weight. They seized everything. Jerry explained to everyone that they were looking at kidnapping, assault, reckless endangerment of life due to the drug cocktail I had been living on, and as many smaller charges he could think of. The doctor demanded a lawyer. His face paled and he lost most of his bluster when he was told that due to the political nature of the case, it was being handled under Homeland Security guidelines, and that meant no contact with the outside world. He also told everyone that the first to make a deal would be the big winner in the plea down dance. One of the nurses, realizing what she was facing, cut a deal and sang like a bird. Jerry put them all into seclusion, no contact at all with the outside world, while he sorted out the charges. Vivian was enraged. "I always knew he was a shifty pig. I'm gonna enjoy watching his world collapse. We need to get even, get you safe. I'm afraid the apple doesn't fall from the tree, Vivian." And then it hit me. The physical pain and uncertainty of my future had pushed the emotional pain to the rear, but now it surged forward. Eve, the love of my life, my future, was no more. Maybe she never was, but like Stanley, was clever enough to keep it hidden all these years. Either way, she was gone for good. So for 30 minutes Vivian held and rocked me while I screamed in pain and cried like a baby. She sent everyone but Jerry out of the room while I told what I had learned and the video I had seen. When I was spent, Vivian held my head between her hands, looking into my eyes. I've known Eve for a long time, Tommy. She loves you. No one is that good an actress. Something is terribly wrong. I can feel it. Have you listened to her explanation? Has she said she doesn't love you? When I told her I hadn't had a chance to talk to her and didn't know what I would say if I did, she begged me to reserve judgment until we talked. I don't know if I can, I told her, even if we do talk. I can't get that video out of my head. What could she possibly say to justify that? I don't know, honey. We need to see her, and you need to promise to listen. Will you? After a few minutes of soul-searching, I agreed I would. If nothing else, to make sure the marriage was really dead. We needed to act quickly. Stan didn't know I was free, and I'm sure he had someone reporting on me at regular intervals. Jerry took my complaint to give him a legal reason to investigate him. At the very least, he could be charged with kidnapping, aggravated assault, and attempted blackmail. When I told him about the threat of kiddie porn on my computer, he immediately sent someone to collect it. Because of the kidnap, the FBI was called in. They agreed to let the SBI take the lead, then add the federal charges when he was in custody. Being drugged and confined to bed actually helped my rib heal, so I could move fairly well, as long as I didn't try to go fast or bump anything. We need to seize that cell phone and as many of his campaign computers as we can. Can you tell me how many were aware of what's going on? I had no idea. His security detail for sure. Beyond that, I have no idea. Talk to his wife and daughter. Jerry was all business. Stan had a bad reputation with law enforcement. They brainstormed. Vivian came up with the plan. Stan put his cell phone in a briefcase one of his security detail carried while he made speeches, so it wouldn't be a distraction. He had a rally with state workers to attend tomorrow. I would appear to frighten him, and they would serve Stan and his crew, confiscating all cell phones. They wouldn't arrest him, just say he was under investigation, hoping he would panic and do something stupid. I was driven to the rally the next day. I was rolled in a wheelchair. I was pretty sore, but had brought a cane because I wanted to be on my feet when I confronted him. They kept me in seclusion until the speech was over and the question and answer session began. There was nothing spontaneous about them. They were all pre-approved, and he had just the right answers. They wheeled me out at the very end. The press had already started packing up. I stood, and the SBI agents cleared a path. I hobbled right to the edge of the platform. "I've got a question, you son of a bitch," I screamed, even though it made my rib feel like hell. "Where the hell is my wife? Out servicing political allies? Who's she blowing for you today?" He actually went pale, then turned to leave the platform. He was met by 8 SBI agents, with warrants. The press was having a field day, screaming questions, demanding answers. I think Stanley knew right then his political career was over, but was too delusional and obsessive to recognize it. I was pretty much unnoticed until the guy with the briefcase made a dash for freedom, running across the stage and jumping into the crowd. Bad luck for him. He ran right at me. I held the cane like a bat, waiting. He saw me at the last second and tried to veer off. It was the one who kicked me in the balls. I caught him across the forearm. Everyone close heard the snap of the bone, and he dropped the case. Despite an obviously broken arm, he tried to pick it up. I hooked him around the neck and pulled, a really bad idea, because it propelled him right into me, and down we went, him on top of me. I got to relive the joy of a breaking rib all over again. Pain took over, and all I could do was lie there. The agents had gotten to us by them, and they seized him and the case, and helped me back into the wheelchair. There's always an ambulance or two at these big rallies, so they were quick to come. Not as quick as a reporter, though. He shoved a microphone into my face and asked what happened. "Stanley Wallace happened," I gasped out. "He did this to me." The cops pulled him out of the way, making room for the ambulance. Someone had identified me, and one of the crowd yelled out a question as the painkillers took the herd away. "Mr. Yount, do you still support Stanley Wallace?" "Not no, but hell no. The man is a snake. He'll do anything to get elected. He'd sleep with his grandmother on network TV if he thought it would get the pervert vote out. Since she's dead, he'd dig her up and do it if it got him the necromancer vote." All right, that was a little over the top, and I should have said sodomize, but I was going for effect. Jerry gave a statement for the press from the rally stage. At this time, Speaker Wallace is being investigated for possible campaign violations, aggravated assault, communicating threats, and kidnapping. The FBI has graciously allowed us to lead the investigation, and we will work closely together, releasing any new information as it becomes available. That is all I can say at this time. Thank you. The press had a field day. There was video and photos of him being led away. My confrontation with his security man was on YouTube and had 2 million hits in 5 days. The networks, especially Fox, practically kept it in the public eye 24 hours a day. Stanley went into seclusion, saying the charges were false, fabricated by his political enemies and a bitter ex-son-in-law because his daughter was divorcing him for abuse and mental cruelty. He continued to run ads until the stations pulled them. In 4 days, he went from neck and neck to almost zero chance of winning. The analysts were predicting a landslide victory for his opponent. I was in protective custody. My brother Fred was a county deputy, and the SBI asked the sheriff to loan him out for security purposes because he'd know who was supposed to be around. His whole family, Celeste, the boys, and Amy moved into my house. Vivian was there as often as she could. She and Amy hovered over me. Once Amy caught me holding our wedding picture and crying. She spoke to me, and I didn't acknowledge her. She was 11 now, starting to look more like Celeste every day. I felt her hands on my cheeks, pulling me around. I had long since shaven off my beard, but the gesture was the same. I know Aunt Eve didn't do those things. And deep down, you do too. She'll come home, you'll see. Nothing could keep her from you. Believe, Uncle Tommy, please believe. They found the kiddie porn on my computer, and the feds loaned Jerry a couple of experts who chased the porn through 3 continents and 11 countries before the trail ended in the state capital. The computers and the cell phones yielded a lot of interesting information. Seems Stan was blackmailing a few supporters with hidden video of them in compromising positions, going back years. Other than the clip he showed me, there were no more shots of Eve. There were, however, clips of Greta with 6 different men. In each case, she looked drugged or terrified. It was too late for his party to salvage the election, so they denounced him and withdrew support a week before the election. He was arrested shortly after that as he tried to leave the country. His campaign accountant, after realizing he was looking at 50 years, cut a deal and sang like a diva. The same was true for 2 of his security detail and the campaign manager. In fact, so many wanted to cut deals Jerry stopped offering them. An assistant had a bargaining chip. She knew where Eve and Greta were. It had been over 2 weeks since I had been attacked. Jerry had everyone available looking for them, but could find no trail at all. They were in a private rehab facility 2 states away. Vivian told me, and even though she begged me not to, I went with them when they went to pick them up for questioning. Since they were out of state, the FBI took the lead. They showed up with warrants and 4 teams, plus Jerry and part of his team. He was there as guests, and to take them into custody for questioning, to see if extradition was necessary. They showed up unexpectedly. The director met them, invited them into his office. He said he had nothing to hide, and they would be free to look anywhere they wanted, but for liability purposes he wanted the company attorney present to look at the warrants and watch. The agent in charge was polite, but had been on the job long enough to recognize stall tactics. He turned to his crew. Start now. Detain anyone who tries to hinder you. I'll wait here with the good director for his lawyer. I was outside, waiting with Vivian, because she insisted on coming. When the press started speculating just how much I may have been involved, in a rare and controversial move, she held a press conference. Tommy Yount, in my opinion, as well as all who have come to know him, is a decent, moral person. I have come to consider him and his wife as surrogate children. My husband and I have enjoyed the friendship of he and his wife for years. I stand behind the belief that he will be vindicated and cleared of any hint of wrongdoing in this affair. Thank you. I had served with her on 2 committees and often escorted her to various functions if her husband, a lawyer with a very successful private practice, was unavailable. He introduced me to golf and laughed when I became addicted. He was counsel of record for me in this mess. When one tabloid speculated that we were all involved in some kind of high-powered swinging group, he buried the paper under so many lawsuits they made a full retraction after giving a hefty donation to his pride and joy. The LLI, Local Lawyer Involvement, a non-profit group from all branches of law that took cases pro bono, gave free advice on everything from wills to divorces, and generally educated the public about the law and their roles in it. They even helped clean parks and worked in soup kitchens. It had become so popular there was a branch in every large town in the state. I was on the founding committee, brought on for a lay perspective, and because John liked me. Every out-of-town meeting ended in a round of golf, usually. Vivian spotted them. 2 ambulances with the clinic logo, exiting quietly from a service lot. She immediately called Jerry, and the FBI had them stopped before they had traveled a mile. Greta was in one, even the other. The director was arrested immediately, and the clinic records and computers seized. They had been there since the day after he nearly killed me, secluded and sedated the whole time. The director was charged later, among other things, with reckless medical endangerment of a pregnant woman and her unborn child, a felony in that state. They were brought around slowly, monitored closely. I went in to see her while she was still out. I leaned on my cane, watching her as she slept. She was pale and thin. Her hair appeared lifeless. A memory of her, hair flying and eyes flashing, as she danced around the kitchen, singing to the baby, flashed through my head. I looked at her pregnant stomach, now 7 months along, and wondered if the child was going to be all right, and if it was mine. I didn't speak, didn't try to touch her, knowing I would break down completely if I did. As it was, the tears made it hard for me to see. I checked on Greta. I had always liked her, the quiet smile she would get watching us together, the tears she shed when we gave her the t-shirt that said, "I'm too hot to be a grandmother." Eve's way of telling her we were finally giving her that grandchild she wanted. Even in her sleep she looked haunted. I wondered now what kind of secret life she must have led all these years. The story got bigger and bigger. In the end, besides Stanley, 3 of his security detail, his accountant, his campaign manager, both doctors and assorted nurses, the head of the party, 2 state representatives, 1 federal congressman, 3 judges, 5 lawyers, 10 call girls, and 13 businessmen got indicted. Jerry was like an avenging angel, wreaking havoc among the sinners. Every time somebody got arrested, he implicated someone else. The Wall Street Journal called it the biggest political scandal of the 21st century. Countless editorials were written crying out for an end to career politicians, urging the strongest punishment possible for all guilty parties. Greta and Eve were deposed, with Vivian present. After it was over, she came out, fussed over Amy for a bit, and took me for a walk. She handed me a transcript. I can't bear to tell you, so you'll just have to read it. Greta had been abused and was almost a slave to Stanley almost from the time they married. Some of the things he had forced her to do made me so sick I actually threw up. He only let her have Eve because he needed a family image. He kept them under control with constant psychological conditioning and careful use of drugs. The first time he used Eve as a sexual favor, she was just over 16. He sacrificed her virginity to a 64-year-old man for political gain. The statute of limitations had expired, but his reputation was ruined. At 75, he found himself divorced, broke, and shunned. Along about then is when she started rebelling and getting into drugs and alcohol. He couldn't exactly make it public and face scrutiny, so he more or less had people clean up her messes and keep it out of the press. She thought she had pulled away from him when she got to college, but he pulled her back in at 20, through force and blackmail. He routinely filmed her and Greta for leverage against the men he set them up with. His fixation for recording things hastened his downfall. There was evidence of corruption all the way back to the beginning of his career. She had finally broken free when she met me, telling him if she lost me, she had nothing to lose. She included Greta in the deal, and for almost 4 years, both their lives had been normal as it was supposed to be. She really didn't want to campaign for him, but went along to protect her mom. They were fine as long as I was there, but when I went home, he systematically drugged them, reasserting his will. They fought, but in the end, he had control. It all came apart when I came to take her home. If he had let her go, she would have taken her mother with her, and rumors would start. There was a recording of him, his campaign manager, and 2 of his security team discussing letting them go, using the first-time pregnancy and a worried mother as reasons, maybe filming them at home, cheering him on. The campaign manager killed that idea, reminding Stan he had made promises he needed to keep to secure support. At that moment, I think I hated the campaign manager even more than Stanley. Eve recovered enough to start asking for me. I was still terribly hurt and bitterly angry and refused. Vivian begged me. She needs you. You were her anchor, her comfort, her vindication that she was a good person that was loved just for being her, with no agenda. Please, Tommy. For me, please. I hugged her. You've been a surrogate mother for me. You know my parents died in an accident when I was in my late teens, and my feelings for you made me realize what I missed. Do you know we had decided to name the child Vivian Greta? For her mother and mine? Vivian had tears in her eyes. I can't, Vivian, not right now. If she needed me so badly, why didn't she stay home? Didn't she realize that anything he had on her would hurt him far worse than her if anything came out? What could have made her do it? Vivian slapped me. That's what made her do it. She couldn't take the chance that you would leave her if you found out. I know, it doesn't really make sense to us, but you have to remember, she wasn't thinking clearly. The mental and physical abuse, the drugs, the shame, made her desperate to keep it from you. You're her world, Tommy, the only good thing that's happened in her life since she was born. She could see in her eyes she was losing. At least think about the baby. That's your child she's carrying. Doesn't she deserve a good life? The pain was clear in my voice. What about me? Do I deserve any of this? And I do think about the baby. What if it's not mine? Worse, what if it is mine? You know I'll get custody. I don't think a judge alive would let her raise a child alone with her history. Vivian grabbed my arm, so hard it left a bruise. Don't ever say anything like that where she could hear it. That baby and the hope that you may forgive her is all that's keeping her alive. Please, Tommy. I've never asked you for anything again. Please. Celeste came to me later that day. I'm going to see her. I want her to look me in the eye and tell me why she betrayed you. Maybe it'll ease the pain for both of us. Amy is begging to see her, but I won't let her. Not yet. I'll call you later. Celeste talked to her, and Greta. She never said a whole lot about what they talked about, but she did say her psychiatrist wanted to talk to me. In fact, she said, she was almost begging. Celeste, Amy, and Vivian ganged up on me, badgering me for 3 days before I agreed. I think I surprised them all by laying down some ground rules. This is not about me. If I get the least sense of an agenda, or if she tries to steer me in a direction I don't want to go, the conversation is over. I reserve to refuse to answer any questions, but will not give her the same courtesy. If she refuses to answer, the conversation is over. Make it clear to her, and if she still wants to talk, I leave, and there will be no second chance. And make this really plain to her. She is to bear no message from Eve. None. It took the doctor 2 days before she decided to agree to my terms. I think it shocked her when I refused to go to her office and made her come to my house. I made sure we were alone. I didn't offer her refreshments. I just had her sit on the couch. Well, first, Tommy, thank you for seeing me. You have a lovely home. Thank you. And it's Mr. Yount. You're not my friend. You're not my doctor. You're a salesman, here to sell me something I probably don't want. So, let's keep it formal. I'll make it easy for you. What do you want? She reddened. I had pretty much blocked her normal course of action, so she had to think on the fly, trying to tell me what she needed from me without angering me. It took her a few minutes to decide how to proceed. I'll come right to the point. Eve is not holding up very well. We've gotten the drugs out of her system, but she's not improving. She needs you. I've spent a good bit of time with her. You're her rock, her vindication that she was a good person and deserved happiness. By taking that away, you're destroying her. If it weren't for the baby, I'm afraid she'd be suicidal. Please, you don't have to talk about the future. You don't have to commit to anything. Just be there. She needs you, Tom, or Mr. Yount. She waited expectantly. Let me ask you something, doctor. Since we're talking about your patient, am I covered by confidentiality rules? Can you discuss anything I've said or will say today with anyone? She agreed that the conversation was covered. I could see the shock on her face when I went off. You know what, doctor? I'm tired of being told what to do to ease Eve's pain. What I need to do to get her better. You know what else, doc? Screw her. I'm sick to death about people telling me to help her. Did I wreck the marriage? Is there a film of me out there somewhere performing oral sex with someone just to help her dad win an election? Did I get her nearly beaten to death, then drugged and hidden away? She's in a guarded facility that keeps the real world away. I'm forced to deal with the nut jobs, the tabloids, the looks and whispers when I walk down the street. Walk a mile in my shoes, doctor, and then ask me to be compassionate. This conversation is over. Goodbye, doctor. Have a nice life. I didn't slam the door in her face, but it was pretty close. I felt a little bad about it later. She had been drugged and confined against her will, but man, did it feel good to vent. Maybe I needed to check into therapy myself. I had not been idle during this time. My lawyer came to me. Time to protect your assets. Remember that prenup we made up, just for fun? Well, it might have been a joke, but that doesn't make it any less legal. I remembered. I didn't want the money, but it was a way to make her admit she had betrayed me. He froze all her assets, citing the prenup. I reminded him to tell her all she had to do was admit her adultery, and she got it all back. But it had to be done publicly, in a manner of my choosing. She refused. Greta was out of the hospital, but was in seclusion at a high-end clinic specializing in trauma and abuse cases. She wasn't restricted to the grounds, although they discouraged leaving the facility. There was a knock at my door, and when I answered it, I found her on her knees. Greta, what are you doing? I'm begging, Tommy. You have to go see her. She's stopped eating. They're feeding her through tubes. They're worried about the baby. I'm a broken woman, Tommy. I have nothing, no self-respect, no future, and now I'm about to lose my family. I'll do anything. Do you understand? Anything to save my daughter and grandchild. Please, Tommy. Please. I helped her up and brought her inside. You're not alone, Greta. I've always admired you and always thought you'd be a perfect grandmother. Vivian cares for you a lot, whether she says anything or not. I read your statement. None of what happened to you was your fault. It broke my heart. I'll always be here for you. Anything you need. I need you to save my daughter and your wife and child. Please, I'll go with you. The pain was just too much. I crumbled, mentally. The health of my child was at risk, as well as that of the woman I loved. I hustled her into the car. She looked like a ghost. Pale, so thin she looked skeletal. Her 8-month belly looked abnormally huge compared to the rest of her. She had been lightly sedated, and her arms restrained, so she couldn't pull the IVs or feeding tubes out. I didn't think it was possible for my heart to ache anymore, but I was wrong. Greta told me a lot on the way over. I know how it looks, Tommy, but she never betrayed you. The film clip you saw was the only time she ever came close. She was forced, but in the end she couldn't do it. She was restrained, and when he tried to force his penis into her mouth, she moved and bit him on the thigh so deep he had to have 7 stitches. Stanley would have beaten her if I hadn't intervened. He still used the clip to keep her in line. She hung her head in shame. I told him I'd substitute for her. I had sex with him 3 days later, but it kept her safe. She was crying quietly. I just held her hand and thought of ways to make Stanley's life hell on earth every day until he died. I couldn't help it. The tears started, and I pulled a chair up and held her hand with one hand, stroking her hair and cheek with the other. The doctors decided to let her awaken, to see if me being there would bring her around. She came to her senses quietly. Greta held one hand. I had the other, but had dozed off. I woke when she tightened her grip, trying to make sure I was really there. The tears started falling. She was trying to talk around her feeding tube. One of the nurses removed it gently. Her voice was a croak. Tommy? Tommy, I need. I put my fingers in her lips and brushed her hair back out of her face. You don't need to do anything but get well. You'll need your strength. We'll soon be chasing our daughter around, and you need to be able to keep up. If you promise not to do anything silly, I'll take these restraints off. I have an urgent need to hug you. She was crying. Greta was crying. The 2 nurses were misty-eyed. They helped remove the restraints. She was so weak she had to be helped, but she ended up in my lap, holding tightly, still crying. I held her for 2 hours, only putting her back in bed when dinner arrived. Soup, mashed potatoes, and pureed vegetables, with gelatin for dessert. It looked like baby food. I actually fed her, promising her a kiss for every bite she took. She did her best to clean the plate. I had a rocking chair brought into the room, and after dinner I held and rocked her, giving her every kiss I promised and a few extra. Every time she tried to talk about what happened, I stopped her, saying we would talk about it when she had her strength back. She did manage to get one thing out. I never cheated on you, Tommy, never. That's why I wouldn't honor the prenup, even though the evidence was pretty damning. She ate everything placed in front of her. If I had to leave, she would become very agitated. I got into the habit of making sure Celeste, Greta, or Vivian was there. She had just about stopped crying when we let Amy see her. There wasn't a dry eye in the room for 2 hours, and that included me. They hugged fiercely. Aunt Eve, I thought we lost you. Don't ever do that again. Ever. I love you, Aunt Eve. Eve actually reassured her. Baby, I'm right here, and I'll never be far from you, or the rest of the family, ever again. I promise. Please stop crying. I've seen enough tears. She held her hand and chattered for almost 2 hours, discussing everything from baby names to boys. I took that as a sign to leave them alone. I took Greta and Vivian to the coffee house down the street. They gave me an update. The grand jury is in. Stanley will die in prison if convicted of half the charges. He'll be surrounded by a lot of friends, though I doubt they view him as such right about now. Our lawyers have gotten the district attorneys to take our testimony behind closed doors, because we're the victims. I'd do it on network television if I thought it would get him another year, but we have to think about Eve. Are you going to testify? I reached out and took Greta's hand. Yes, as loudly as possible. I want that pig fried. The baby came 2 weeks early. As it happened, her water broke as we were leaving the hospital. She tightened her grip on my hand. Turn around, Tommy. I didn't understand. Did you forget something? Yes, I forgot I'm having a baby. She's coming, honey, now. I totally freaked out, picking her up and rushing back through the doors. The baby is coming. Help. The baby is coming. The duty nurse had seen it all. Put her in this wheelchair, Paul Revere, and let us do our job. You might as well come along. It doesn't look like she's going to wait long. Let's get you suited up. She held my hand the whole time, yelling and screaming. She was in labor for less than 3 hours. Vivian Greta Yount came into the world at 1:55 p.m. with a lusty scream. Her vocal ability was proven often over the years. She was the loudest child I had ever seen. They let me cut the cord, then took her, cleaned her, and handed her back to me. I had the great honor of placing my daughter on my wife's breast, and she soon found her nipple. Eve just looked on in wonder, before looking up at me. At that precise moment in time, I knew we were going to be just fine. I stroked her hair. You owe me 2 more, but I think we need to wait at least 2 years for the next one. All right? She couldn't speak, but her eyes spoke volumes. My whole family was in the waiting room, along with Greta. Vivian. Her husband came 2 hours later, and surprisingly, Jerry, they all trooped to the nursery and oohed and awed over her while I stood, bursting with pride. The women went into the room at feeding time. Greta got to hold her first, followed by Vivian, then Celeste, then Amy. They had to almost pry her away from Amy. She really didn't want to let go. Eve was in therapy, alone and with me for almost 2 years. She still sees her every 3 months. It wasn't all sunshine and roses. We were really uncomfortable around each other for a long time. When things would get tense, we developed a habit of going into the baby's room. We usually left holding hands, and we vowed, almost every day, to always talk and trust each other completely. We didn't make love until Vivian was almost 7 months old. It was slow, tentative, like we were afraid the other would shatter. But it was beautiful and very satisfying. Soon our intimacies grew in intensity, and we were almost back to where we were. Greta was in therapy a long time also. In a shrewd move, she had kept her money separate. Stanley was fine with this, thinking if things went south her money would save him. It didn't quite work out that way. A year later, she started seeing Jerry. 6 months later he moved in. 8 months later they married. Vivian and John were very active in her granddaughter's life, becoming her godparents. So it came to pass her grandmother were the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, and her grandfather on the other side was the Director of the State Bureau of Investigation. Talk about connected. Fred put his 20 years in with the Sheriff's Department and retired. I made him a full partner, and he runs the business for us now. I had a new job. The political fallout from the scandal was enormous, going on for a long time as new information came out, damaging both parties. Jerry proved to be a bulldog, never giving up once he hit a scent. There were several emergency elections the next few years. They appointed a political flunky to take Stan's seat, and he was so inept when the term was up he didn't even get a nod from his party. The election was pretty well contested, due to the addition of an independent candidate. Me. I was interviewed at the beginning of the primary season. I had no idea why. You know, the American Revolution was fought in part for financial reasons. Taxation without representation, career politicians, etc. The Constitution was pretty much written to discourage career politicians. You were supposed to come off the plantation or ship, out of the shop, do the best you could, and go back home, leaving it for the next guy. Now, unless you do something monumentally stupid like Stanley Wallace and his cronies, you have over a 90% probability of being reelected. The system is broken again, and I don't see a way to fix it. The interviewer was intrigued. So you're saying in a perfect world there would be no career politicians? I doubt it would be a perfect world, but I bet it would be a lot better. He wouldn't let it go. So, in a world like that, you'd run for office? I laughed. Maybe, but I'd be the world's worst politician. I'm too honest. I made a major mistake, thinking that people wouldn't read it, or if they did, they wouldn't take it seriously. Wrong. People I never heard of were calling me, asking if I would run. I steadfastly refused. Then one day, out of the blue, my old political team showed up. Billy Grant, Zane Williams, Jerry Smith, and of course Thad Emerson. To say I was surprised was putting it mildly. I looked at their grins and had a bad feeling. Hi boys, long time. No see. What's up? Thad grinned. You are, baby. How'd you like to be a state representative? I hugged them all and invited them in. We caught up. Billy was a political science teacher at a small university 2 states over. Zane and Jerry ran a think tank that analyzed election prospects of various candidates, mostly for their parties. Their track record was 93%. Most of their failures were due to scandals and undisclosed information by the candidate in question. They researched and bought a small investigation service, strictly for in-house use. Thad was a political consultant who often used his friends for support. He had successfully managed the campaigns of 5 state officials, 3 U.S. senators, and 2 congressmen. He had also managed the campaign for several mayors in major cities. His record was 11-3. Eve greeted them warmly, remembering better days. They loved the baby. Billy had 2, Zane 1. Thad was divorced, no children. Jerry was gay and didn't have a permanent partner. About what you asked earlier. Not no, but hell no. Why on earth would I want back into that world after what it put us through? They had apparently thought this out, because it gives you a chance to show people how to do it right. This is a golden opportunity to give the government back to the people. Don't say no right away, talk it over together, and with your closest friends. See what they think. What have you got to lose? I had thought it out too. Sleep, peace of mind. You guys no doubt read about what we went through. You weren't here, so you really have no idea what it was like. I turned to Eve. Surely you don't think this is a good idea? She looked deeply into my eyes. I think it's an excellent idea. What kind of world would this be for our children if somebody doesn't take a stand? Show them there were decent people trying to make their future better. It would do me a world of good personally, sort of an atonement for past mistakes. Balance the books for my family, so to speak. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would ever have this conversation. After a couple of hours, they talked me into asking around. Vivian was all for it. So did John and Greta and Jerry. My family, especially Celeste, thought it was an excellent idea. Thad and the group came over 3 weeks later. We have to form a party. Why? I asked. Why can't I just run as an independent? Jerry laid it out for me. It would send the wrong message. Even with the grant fight, you were a part of a group of like-minded individuals. You need to give them something to believe in, to draw them out. You'd come off as a bitter loner without it, and you'd have no chance. Eve listened with interest. Sometimes I forget how smart or how politically savvy she was. They're right. I've been thinking, and I have some suggestions. She said. We were all ears. Your basic premise in the interview was that career politicians were a bad idea. Build on that. Push the idea that a man should have one shot at doing the right thing before making way for someone with fresh ideas. Build on that. She sighed. Besides, I don't think I could stand the thought of being a politician's wife for more than one term. So we took her idea and ran with it, forming the One Chance Party. Bill started a viral campaign, broadcasting bits and pieces of our theory before launching a website. The premise was really simple. If you were a politician at the state level and above and a member, you had to pledge to serve only one term. If you were a voting member, you had to pledge not to support any candidate who runs more than once. That's simple. Serve with pride and integrity. Leave with dignity and honor. It became our motto. Of course, it was funded with Eve's money. It was just a grassroots movement, not formally registered, with no candidate running, so we were able to spend as much as we wanted. After a month, with 25,000 signatures, the minimum for establishing a party, we went public and registered, announcing my candidacy for the office of state senator in the 9th district. It caught the political establishment by surprise, and they scrambled to block it, but thanks to Thad's group and the LLI, with John at point, they couldn't. In light of the federal scandal over the Tea Party, they didn't try very hard, considering us a nuisance. Our lawyers kept us in line, being scrupulously attentive to detail. The seed money was ours, but soon we had donations coming in. It was explained to everyone who wanted to donate that any amount over $100 would be posted on our site, so anyone could see at a glance who our supporters were. Greta, Vivian, and John gave the largest legally allowable donation possible. Amy was one of our first donors, giving $25 from her babysitting money through Celeste. Because I was registered, I was able to attend and participate in any debate. I was always third, but used it to my advantage. During the first debate, I kept pretty quiet, until the Republican pushed me, wanting to know what I would do about certain state problems. Probably very little at first. I plan on taking the first year to learn. After that, I'll probably make a lot of noise. In a later debate, I challenged them on their party records. Sir, I said, addressing my Republican opponent, last year, your party voted the straight ticket 8 times out of 10, nationally and locally. Do you agree with that statement? He had to, because it was public knowledge. The Democrat snickered. I turned to him. And you, sir, your party voted the straight ticket 9 times out of 10, also verifiable? Do you agree with this statement? He had to admit it. Then, sirs, I need to ask, if you were both working for your parties, who was working for the American people? When they weren't able to give an answer, the applause brought the debate to a standstill. The party was growing by leaps and bounds. Other states started their own branches. We made absolutely sure they agreed to the tenets of our party. I was campaigning, doing radio and television ads in limited number. Thad had picked a key phrase from my last debate. He flooded billboards with it. Who's working F are the American people? Call your representatives in government and ask them. If you don't like their answers, go to onechanceparty.com. The hits were amazing, and our numbers grew. Even Greta stood by me during the campaign. They were worried about it at first, but I insisted. By now, most details of their past had leaked out. They need to see you. Let everyone know while you may regret your past, you're looking towards the future. It might hurt me, but I'm not ashamed of either one of you, and I'm really going to need you by my side. Greta was invaluable, her insights dead on. She hadn't been a political wife all those years, even in the situation she was forced into, without learning a few things. Vivian and Jerry had to stay away, for obvious reasons. Didn't stop them to appearing during dinners and giving us support. I made it clear to the press right away that the past was just that, the past. Anyone who made comments or asked questions anyway ended up at the bottom of the list when question time came. They got the point and stopped pretty quick. Amy was in junior high now, and they held a mock election. When she found out the One Chance Party had been excluded, she went all the way to the school board in protest, where it caught the interest of the local reporters. The school was forced to allow the party, and Amy ran. She won, getting 60% of the vote. The advertising was priceless to us. In the end, I won, being declared the winner before 75% of the precincts were in. In the end, I got 80,000 more votes than the registered members of my party. The national media gave us a lot of attention. You may remember my term. I certainly got a lot of attention, exposing waste and graft, refusing to make deals if it wasn't in the best interests of my district and state. When it was over, I did indeed return home, despite pleas from all over the state. I refused, graciously. In my farewell speech, I thanked everyone who believed in me and reminded them of the promise I made at the start. Our little party was nationwide, an established third party. One state got discredited after allowing 2 state and 2 federal candidates to run again, using the party banner. The billboards went up all over that state, showing the candidates with the word liar over every face, urging people to go to the website and view the pledge forms with their signatures. They all lost, 2 rejoined their old parties, and 2 disappeared from public life. Was our system of government better because of it? History will have to be the judge. After I left office, I made a trip to a medium security prison downstate. I was really surprised to see he put me on the visitor's log. He was thinner, most of his hair was gone, and what was left was almost white. I knew he had gotten beaten up a few times. His tough-on-crime stance was widely known. There were probably inmates in every prison in the system who had a few years added to their sentence because of his policies. He shuffled over and sat. I saw the cut mark on his cheek and knew what it meant. Seems he and a lifer had developed a relationship. 3 years, and they were still a couple. Come to gloat. Finally, he sneered, but it had no real anger in it. No, if I never see you again, it will be too soon. You're the lowest of the low in my opinion. I used to wish you'd die, but after I thought about it, I'm glad you'll be here the rest of your life. I hope you have a lot of years left. I sighed. Your wife and daughter sent me. They wanted me to show you something. I pulled out a photo of Greta and Jerry, taken on the beach during their 2nd anniversary cruise. Even at her age, she looked damn fine in a bikini. This could have been you, creep, if you had shown her the least amount of love. He didn't even flinch, but his eyes tightened. This, I held up a 5x7, is your first granddaughter, Vivian. It was a picture of her 3rd birthday. She was on Eve's lap, trying to smear birthday cake on her mother's face. They were both laughing. She was over 4 now. I held up another, of a small boy, just before he turned 2, sleeping in my lap. This is your grandson, Thomas Yount, too. We call him Deuce. I held up another, a formal picture of Eve with the kids, her 7-month bulge showing. I handed him a sonogram. And this is your 2nd granddaughter, Amy Celeste. Eve wanted you to see these, to know that despite what you did to her and her mom, that they ended up happy, normal, supported and cherished by good men. She wanted you to know what you could have had you been a decent human being. I got up to leave. I had honored her request, and I wasn't staying a minute longer. I was walking away when I heard something. I looked around. He was still sitting at the table crying. He looked up and in a broken voice begged me to leave the photos and the sonogram of the kids. I started to refuse, but decided it would cause him even more pain, reminding him of what could have been. When he died 7 years later, his cell wall was covered with every photo I sent him. Eve was informed of his death and refused to claim the body or go to his cremation. I have no idea what they did with the ashes. In the end, he got his due, and I had my life back. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.